Okay, I was reading in the Bible, and it says you honor your father and your mother, but you should never call anybody father except the Father in heaven. And that was just kind of puzzling because I used to have someone sit there and say, you're only supposed to call your parents father or mother, and then you call Father up in heaven. So that was kind of one of my, that was kind of confusing to me. Then the other one is that it says, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words will never. So those are just some really good Bible questions, and it's like, wow, these are really good. I'd like to find an answer for them.
Well, the heaven and earth one, just very quickly, dear, is speaking of our present world. It's not speaking of heaven. Our eternal home is going to fade away or pass away. I don't believe that. Again, when we look at the Bible, when we look at verses pertaining to heaven, hell, earth, all these things, we have to look at all the verses that pertain to that. Otherwise, you could get a skewed view. And the same applies for Father. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, exactly. And Jennifer, it's a great question. Both questions really great questions. But, when it comes to this issue of Father, we're told back in Exodus chapter 20, when the Lord gave the 10 commandments to Israel, to honor your father and mother. And so, in the scriptures, God, when he was speaking his commandments to Moses to give to the children of Israel, he referred to earthly fathers as father. And so we know, as Mike says, in looking at all the scriptures, that when Jesus said what he said about not calling, people father, we know that, he's not restricting us from calling our earthly fathers father because of the commandment that he gives us there in Exodus 20. But there in Matthew 23:9, what he's actually talking about and who he's dealing with are the religious leaders of that time, especially the scribes and the Pharisees. And so what's interesting is when you read the rest of the Gospels and what Jesus has to say, it's interesting that most of Jesus's words that were rebukes went to the most religious people. And one of those rebukes is this one. And the whole idea behind this is the Pharisees, they loved to have titles. They loved to have people to look up to them. They loved to have people because many of them were teachers of the law. They loved to be called teacher. They loved to be called master. Father was one of those titles that they enjoyed having those kind of titles because it made them feel important. It made them feel big. It made them feel above everyone else. And so, Jesus is coming along there as he's in Matthew 23, giving all these woes to the Pharisees. He's like, listen, the title Abba Father really only belongs to God the Father because he's the Father of us all. And that's what he's getting to. It's more of an issue dealing with people who love prominence and titles. They love to be seen by men and thought to be spiritual and all of this. And so that's what that has to do with. And so he's dealing there again, just with the egos of these people, because again, these were men who were rejecting him, their very creator, Jesus, rejecting him as their Messiah. And so he dealt with it, in that way. So that's pretty much what it had to do with. So, Mike.
Hope that answers it for you, Jennifer.